where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Today's episode unravels a tale of scandal that erupts after a Catholic priest's secret affair turns deadly. Father Thomas Byon, 43, was more than just a priest to the people of K. He was a beacon of hope, a confidant, and a pillar of the community. With his salt and pepper hair, piercing blue eyes, and ever-present warm smile, Father Byon embodied the very essence of a man devoted to his calling. His sermons were known to draw crowds from beyond the parish boundaries, filling the pews of St. Michael's with eager listeners seeking spiritual guidance and comfort. Born and raised in South Boston, Thomas Byon had not always seemed destined for the priesthood. As a young man, he had struggled with his faith, grappling with the harsh realities of life in a working-class neighborhood. His father, a dock worker, had battled alcoholism, while his mother worked tirelessly as a nurse to keep the family afloat. It was during these tumultuous years that young Thomas found solace in the church, guided by a compassionate priest who saw potential in the troubled youth. This early experience shaped Father Byon's approach to ministry. He had a particular talent for connecting with those on the fringes of society, the addicted, the homeless, the lost. His outreach programs became models of modern ministry, earning him accolades from the church hierarchy and the deep gratitude of his parishioners. To many in Concord, Father Byon seemed the very embodiment of Christian virtue, compassionate, tireless, and deeply committed to his flock. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect priest lay a tumultuous inner life, one marked by doubt, loneliness, and a yearning for human connection that would ultimately lead to his downfall. The story of Father Byon's secret affair and its deadly conclusion came to light on a cold autumn morning when the body of 35-year-old Sophia Rossi was discovered in the church rectory. Sophia Rossi was a relative newcomer to Concord, having moved to the town just 2 years prior. A talented art restorer, she had been contracted by the Concord Museum to work on their collection of Revolutionary War-era paintings. Sophia was striking, with long dark hair, olive skin, and expressive brown eyes that hinted at her Italian heritage. She quickly became known in town for her friendly demeanor and passion for history and art. Born in Florence, Italy, Sophia had grown up surrounded by some of the world's greatest artistic masterpieces. Her father, an art history professor, had instilled in her a deep appreciation for the power of art to capture the human experience. Her mother, a conservator at the Uffizi Gallery, had taught her the delicate skills needed to preserve these treasures for future generations. It seemed inevitable that Sophia would follow in her parents' footsteps, and she threw herself into her studies with passion and dedication. But Sophia's journey to Concord had not been without its challenges. A failed marriage in Italy had left her disillusioned and questioning her faith. The move to America represented a fresh start, a chance to reinvent herself in a place where no one knew her history. What few in Concord realized was that Sophia was grappling with her own past traumas and a crisis of faith that would draw her into Father Byon's orbit. The discovery of Sophia's body sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Concord. Detective Sarah Chen, a 15-year veteran of the Concord Police Department, was called to the scene. As she approached the rectory, the Gothic Revival architecture of St. Michael's loomed over her, its spire reaching towards a gray sky heavy with a promise of rain. The weight of what she was about to encounter pressed down on her, a feeling of dread settling in her stomach. Detective Chen had seen her fair share of tragedy in her years on the force, but something about this case felt different from the moment she arrived. Perhaps it was the location. The idea that a brutal crime could occur in a place of worship was deeply unsettling. Or perhaps it was the victim. Sophia Rossi had become a familiar face around town, her warm smile and passionate discussions about art a common sight in Concord's cafes and galleries. Inside the rectory, the scene that greeted Detective Chen was one that would haunt her for years to come. Sophia's body lay crumpled at the foot of the stairs, her unseeing eyes staring at the ceiling. The fall had clearly been violent. There was blood on the stairs and walls. But it was the expression frozen on Sophia's face that truly chilled Detective Chen, a mixture of shock and betrayal that spoke of a death that was sudden and unexpected. As the crime scene technicians worked methodically around her, photographing and collecting evidence, Detective Chen's mind raced with questions. How had Sophia Rossi ended up in the rectory after hours? Where was Father Byron? Why did the scene feel staged, as if someone had attempted to make the death look like an accident? The absence of Father Byron was quickly noted, and an appy was put out for the priest and his vehicle. As news of the murder spread through Concord, disbelief turned to horror. Parishioners gathered outside St. Michael's, some weeping openly, others standing in stunned silence. The idea that a murder could occur in their church, possibly involving their beloved priest, was almost too much to bear. Among the crowd, Detective Chen noticed an elderly woman clutching a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. This was Margaret O'Brien, a lifelong member of St. Michael's and one of Father Byron's most devoted parishioners. The detective made a mental note to speak with Mrs. O'Brien later. In a small town like Concord, the eyes and ears of the elderly often held valuable information. As the investigation began in earnest, Detective Chen and her team faced the delicate task of unraveling the hidden threads of Father Byron's life. They started with interviews of the church staff, treading carefully to balance the need for information with sensitivity to the shock and grief that permeated the parish. The church secretary, a middle-aged woman named Ellen Fitzgerald, was the first to hint at the possibility of an inappropriate relationship between Father Byron and Sophia Rossi. With obvious reluctance, she spoke of late-night meetings in the rectory, hushed phone calls, and a growing tension that had seemed to surround the priest in recent weeks. "I didn't want to think anything of it," Ellen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Father Byron was always so dedicated to helping people. I thought maybe Miss Rossi was having some kind of spiritual crisis. But now, oh God, what if I could have prevented this somehow?" The guilt and anguish in Ellen's voice were palpable, a sentiment that Detective Chen would encounter repeatedly as she delved deeper into the case. It seemed that many in the church community had noticed small signs that something was amiss, but no one had been willing to voice their concerns about the beloved priest. As the investigation progressed, a clearer picture of Father Byron's double life began to emerge. Financial records revealed irregularities in the church accounts, small amounts at first, but growing larger and more frequent over the past year. Detective Chen traced these discrepancies to a series of expensive dinners, hotel stays, and jewelry purchases, presumed gifts for Sophia. The revelation of financial impropriety added another layer of betrayal for the parishioners of St. Michael's, many of whom had given generously. The church trusted Father Byrne to use the funds for the good of the community. The idea that their hard-earned money had been used to finance an illicit affair was deeply painful for many. A search of Sophia's apartment yielded crucial evidence in the form of a personal journal. The entries painted a picture of a woman torn between her growing feelings for Father Byrne and her guilt over their illicit relationship. Sophia wrote of stolen moments of passion, promises made in the heat of the moment, and a love that both participants knew was forbidden. But there were also darker undertones in Sophia's writings. She spoke of pressure from Father Byrne to keep their relationship a secret and his increasing paranoia about being discovered. In the final entries, there was a growing sense of fear, as if Sophia had realized she was in over her head, but didn't know how to extricate herself from the situation. One entry, dated just a week before her death, was particularly chilling. "I don't know who Thomas is anymore. The man I fell in love with seems to have disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognize. His eyes, once so kind, now seem to burn with a desperation that frightens me. What have I done? How did we end up here?" As Detective Chen read these words, she felt a deep sense of sadness for Sophia. It was clear that the young woman had been caught up in something. She hadn't fully understood a relationship that had spiraled far beyond her control. The town of Concord was in turmoil as details of the scandal began to leak out. The case dominated conversations in every home, cafe, and workplace. Longtime parishioners defended Father Byrne, unable to reconcile the man they knew with the emerging portrait of a liar and a thief. Others felt betrayed, their faith shaken to its core. The local newspaper, the Concord Journal, ran daily updates on the case. The headline, "Fall from Grace," became a grim reminder of the tragedy unfolding in their midst. Reporter Michael Lawson found himself walking a fine line between the public's right to know and the need to respect the privacy of those involved. His articles attempted to provide a balanced view of the unfolding events, but the sensational nature of the case made objectivity a constant challenge. 3 days after Sophia's body was discovered, the investigation took a dramatic turn. Father Thomas Byrne was found in a motel room just outside of Boston, barely alive from a suicide attempt. The priest had left behind a letter confessing to his affair with Sophia, but denying any involvement in her death. He claimed that Sophia had threatened to expose their relationship and his financial misdeeds, leading to a heated argument at her apartment. According to Father Byrne, Sophia had fallen during the confrontation, and he had panicked and fled the scene. The discovery of Father Byrne brought a mix of relief and fresh anguish to the community. For some, his suicide attempt was seen as an admission of guilt, a coward's way out. For others, it was a tragic end to the life of a man they had once revered. As Father Byrne lay in a hospital bed under police guard, Detective Chen and her team worked tirelessly to corroborate or disprove his version of events. The evidence at the crime scene didn't match Father Byrne's account. The angle of Sophia's fall, the defensive wounds on her arms, and traces of the priest's DNA found under her fingernails all pointed to a more violent confrontation than he had described. The medical examiner's report, when it came, confirmed Detective Chen's suspicions. Dr. Samantha Reeves, the county's chief medical examiner, concluded that Sophia had been strangled before her fall down the stairs. The bruising pattern on her neck was consistent with manual strangulation, likely by someone with large, strong hands. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Reeves stated in her report, "Miss Rossi was already dead or unconscious when she fell down the stairs. The fall was likely an attempt to disguise the true cause of death." This revelation turned what might have been argued as an accidental death into a clear case of premeditated murder. The prosecutor's office began building their case against Father Byrne, while the defense team scrambled to find alternative explanations for the damning physical evidence. As the legal machinery ground into motion, the community Father Byrne had once led was left to grapple with the aftermath of his actions. The Bishop of Boston, Cardinal James Sullivan, made a solemn appearance at St. Michael's, addressing the congregation with words of comfort and promises of support. But for many, the damage was already done. Trust had been broken, and the sanctity of their spiritual home had been violated. The case against Father Byrne built steadily. Financial records provided by the church showed the extent of his embezzlement, painting a picture of a man living well beyond his means. Interviews with parishioners and church staff revealed a pattern of behavior that, in hindsight, should have raised red flags. There were stories of late-night counseling sessions, of young women who suddenly stopped attending church, of questions deflected and concerns dismissed. Perhaps most damning was the testimony of Sister Margaret, an elderly nun who had served at St. Michael's for decades. With tears in her eyes, she recounted overhearing an argument between Father Byrne and Sophia on the night of the murder. She spoke of raised voices, of the sound of a struggle, then a terrible silence. Fear and loyalty had kept her quiet initially, but the weight of her conscience had finally driven her to come forward. The trial of Father Thomas Byrne became a media sensation, drawing national attention to the small town of Concord. Reporters camped outside Middlesex County Superior Court, their cameras trained on the steady stream of witnesses entering and exiting the building. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution painted a damning picture of a man who had abused his position of trust, exploiting the faith of his congregation for personal gain, and ultimately resorting to murder to protect his secret.